I was making other companies millions of dollars, and I got tired of doing that. We're going to talk about successes and failures in business, and I've had both. She got robbed twice, one time at gunpoint, and that was literally what birthed our company. If you build it, they will come. I don't believe that.
This is the Content Capitalists Podcast. We talk to business owners who've used video to grow their businesses to $1 million a year or more. How they did it, what worked, what didn't. Welcome to the Content Capitalists with your host, Ken Okazaki.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Content Capitalist Podcast, where I have conversations with entrepreneurs and business owners who are doing at least $1 million in their business, many times a lot more. Today I've got a guest with me who is an absolute legend in his field. Now, when it comes to content creation, there are so many different ways to do it right, and there's a lot of ways to do it wrong. I've got a lot of methods and things that I figured out, but I wanted to bring on another expert in this field, especially because he specializes in one of the platforms that I don't necessarily specialize in, and we'll get into the details on that in a second. Brett, welcome to the show.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Ken.
Awesome. Brett, when I first met you, the impression I got was this guy knows how to dress, because in a sea of really, kind of biz cash attire, you stood out as somebody who took special attention in how you present yourself, how you make a first impression, which was amazing for me, by the way. So I just want to mention that because first impressions really do last. But why don't you get us started by giving the viewers or the listeners kind of an overview of what business you're in, what kind of people you help, and what you help them accomplish.
Sounds awesome. So yeah, I've been in the digital marketing space for 20 years as of March of this year. I have a tremendous amount of experience as it relates to search engine optimization, content creation, social media. I had the opportunity of working with 3 larger agencies and in Ohio. And when I was there, I had an opportunity to work with massive brands. And I was basically get thrown in situations where it was like, you're sinking or you're going to swim with the sharks. So I had opportunities working with brands like Four Seasons Hotels, Marriott, Nationwide, and Progressive Insurance, where you, at an agency, you can't mess those accounts up or your head's getting chopped off really quickly. So I had an opportunity to work with huge brands and learn a ton. And the kicker really was being able to take what the big brands were doing at massive budgets, at massive scale, and take what were they doing to win, and how could I apply that to small and medium-sized businesses. So I spent the last 20 years just perfecting that process of being able to figure out what's working for big brands, apply it to small brands. I spent a significant amount of time in the artificial intelligence space looking at content creation. And right now with GPT-4, this is massive. Everybody is kind of worrying about AI and where it's leading and content creation. And one of the first things I want to say is Google specifically, as of I think February of this year, 2023, has came out and said that they're not necessarily against artificial intelligence, that with content being created with that. It's if you're creating it in a way that's not providing anybody with value. If you find a way to create content that provides a tremendous amount of value to users, and you just happen to use artificial intelligence to do that at scale, there's nothing wrong with that. So I do want to point that out. A lot of people were kind of worried, can that content rank? Can it scale? I've seen a tremendous amount of people ranking content at scale with using GPT-4 and other types of technologies. So I've been dabbling with AI for the last 7 years. Before it was really called, high-level artificial intelligence, when we were looking at creating content and creating variations of content and utilizing different models. So I have a tremendous amount of experience with that. And then as of February of this year, I just got my doctorate. And one of the areas of specialty in that doctorate happened to be artificial intelligence. So I'm doing what I learned over the last 20 years in terms of digital marketing, but I'm also doing a lot with AI in relation to what I learned at school within just the last year.
Amazing. Now, you've given us so much more than I even asked for. Thank you for that. And a little bit of the stuff you're into. Now, I'm curious about something. You're running this digital marketing services, and you're also exploring what's happening in there. I know a lot of people who are in the digital marketing space, and they seem to be completely, their time is maxed out just trying to help their clients and serve them. And I've talked to a few people and they're just like, I don't even have time to look at this, which I think is dangerous for them to not look at this. But it seems like your business is running pretty smoothly so that you're able to go and explore and create new things. Could you tell us a little bit about like the size of your team and the structure of that, just to give the listeners an idea?
Yep. So in terms of content creation, we have over 12 people in-house that write content, and we have access to probably another 20 people. That's an external team for content creators. Right now, we're actually revamping our entire program simply because of AI. So some people are scared of it, and they think that it's going to create content that's not going to be user-friendly. We're doing it in a way right now where we're using the AI to help us create the outlines, the content briefs. It's coming up with first renditions of content, and then we're taking that and having human beings massage it. So there's a lot more that goes into it, and you have to be willing to embrace it. And I actually had a conversation with my head writer from our team, and it was almost like she was having a paradigm shift that she wasn't quite ready to grasp onto at the moment. She was saying, hey, where do I fit in with this AI and content creation? And I said, hey, spend some time getting to know the content and really concentrate on everything that you don't know and learn how you can put a rocket on your back to make you much quicker and much better in terms of the content you're creating. She basically disappeared for 3 days. And when she came back to me, she had said, hey, this is amazing. I'm doing some phenomenal things with these prompts because now I'm considering myself more like a prompt engineer. So if you think you don't have time to embrace the technology, the changes, you will die from a business standpoint because, like for right now, it's not going to be a matter of are you creating content for SEO or other means where you're using AI. It'll be a matter of how are you creating that content? How are you scrubbing it and having human beings massage that content to make it scalable, but make it serve a purpose? Businesses who don't do that, they're going to have a lot of problems because, like, we've already seen 4 or 5 variations of different types of job offerings be created solely because of AI. Like prompt engineers who are needing to teach AI to do different things, and it's like they say, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't create the right kinds of prompts, you don't get good content. The next year, you will not be able to afford to not pay attention to this technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the way I look at it as far as the instructions and the prompts is it's like hiring somebody. Do you have a great training system for a new hire or not? If you don't, then you're going to get mediocre or terrible results from that person you hire. Look, I am so interested in what's going on right now in your business and AI. I want to dive a bit deeper into that in a sec. But before we do, I want the listeners to understand a little bit of your story, your background. You mentioned something about a doctorate, this agency going on for 20 years. Let's take us back in time to before you started this. And that's probably going to be when you're a teenager. What were you doing before you got into digital marketing? What prompted you to jump into this and stick with it for 20 plus years?
So when I started out, like when I was younger, I lived in Los Angeles and I was working in the construction industry. And I used to work with asphalt and paving. And I used to be standing on 350-degree asphalt, shoveling it, tons and tons. I was a machine. I could shovel 6 tons of asphalt in literally 10 minutes by myself. So I was doing that. My dad has a construction company, and I got used to working in that kind of a hard labor. As I went through college, got my undergrad in psychology and human resource management, and I realized, you know what, I need to start looking more into sales. So then I started working for First Rental Car, and I was in their rental program for 2 or 3 years, and I learned how to sell, how to communicate with people, and how to sell car insurance. And then my wife and I moved to San Antonio, Texas, and she was working at a bank, and when she was at the bank, she got robbed twice, one time at gunpoint. And that was literally what birthed our company because my wife said, hey, I'm going to work and I have stomach aches every day, anxiety, I'm having fear. What can I do? And I said, hey, I'm doing some consulting. I think we can make some money working with smaller businesses. And she said, she kind of laughed, really? How are we going to make money doing that? This was like before Google was even a big thing. And I said, hey, if there's a means of selling it, I'm going to sell it. I promise you. So we created a company. I was working with another agency, so she immediately fired me at that other company so we wouldn't have any kind of a conflict of interest with the agency I was working for. And then I was doing my agency stuff, and I was making on night and on weekends. And on my lunch breaks, I was in my car selling for her. And I wound up connecting with an agency that was doing website design and development in Missouri, and I offered services. That took 7 years of working with that company before I was finally able to quit my agency level job. And then I did the agency stuff for another, I'd say 4 or 5 years. And then after that, we decided, so our agency is only 16 years old. I've been in the SEO space 20 years, but the last 16 years have been just growing, learning how to scale teams. I always tell people, everything got started as a result of her getting robbed and me saying, how do I generate more revenue for my family based on my current situation with my wife?
If I came home and my wife told me that someone stuck a gun to her head at work, then I'd be looking for solutions as well. So good for you for making that change. Now, one thing that kind of struck me is how you took everything very gradually and took a step-by-step learning things as you go. I think a lot of people are expecting that, they're going to take a course, pay, $5,000 or $500, whatever that's going to be. And then 6 months from now, they're going to have $1 million business. And in rare instances, that does happen. But more often than not, it's your story, what you just described there. You learn the skills. It's kind of like an apprenticeship stage, and then there's going to be like the learning stage, the solopreneur, and then the solopreneur with an assistant, and then eventually a digital agency. That's pretty much how I started. Similar story, a little bit different timeline, but that is the truth of how solid businesses are built. It's that gradual learning step by step. In Star Wars, when he's learning to levitate that one little rock before Yoda finally gets him to to lift the whole spaceship, right?
Yeah.
I feel like, if you can't lift a pebble, then forget trying to run an entire business. And people try to skip the basics. What were one of the basics that you felt that you've got down so well? You did mention sales, but literally like in the digital marketing space, that you see other people just trying to skip, and then that causes them to collapse later on.
I think a huge part is the process of being able to make sure that you have a defined set of metrics for your own success, and then how you achieve that and what your operations look like. So we created a formula, if you will, that I knew if I did this formula on every single customer, at some point they all would rank, and they all are going to get more sales, more traffic, more conversions. And we put together a plan, and I taught 2 people that plan, and then they started teaching the other people who were working on our team that same exact plan. So it's just really making sure that whatever your secret recipe is, making sure that you clearly define it, you test it, and then you're able to use that on a month-to-month basis. Because like a lot of people in my industry will do different things, and they kind of throw a lot of things at all their campaigns, and they don't really know what was the contributing factor for success. So if you're testing and testing and testing, and you have all these micro tests going on where you have independent factors, it's easier to know, hey, I only did this one thing on this one customer, and they seem to rank in 2 months. And on another customer, I did 3 things, and they ranked in 2 months. And you start creating all these correlations. So that's probably the best thing that I learned, is sticking to the plan, and then never being worried about adapting to what you have to do to stay relevant and to keep your business growing. Those have been some of the biggest lessons I've learned over time.
One thing that stood out to me is when you said like secret recipe. And there is this belief that everything out there is just Googleable and you can find it. And it probably is, but how secret is an agency's recipe? And I don't want you to give it away here, obviously, if it's a secret, a trade secret.
Yeah.
But is it something that nobody's ever heard of, or is it just a combination of things that people are pretty familiar with, but just aren't consistent enough with?
I don't think it's necessarily like some secret recipe. I think it's just a matter of figuring out what has worked over time and to do those things. And then as things change, start switching to do those. So like in the last 20 years, Google has made so many changes, and there used to be all these unknowns. Now, Google says specifically, if you do these things, you will rank. And sometimes they say, like, if you build it, they will come. I don't believe that. I know if you build something and you're in the desert and it's great and it's a hotel, like maybe you might have people come if they know of you. Like if you're in Abu Dhabi or you're in like some place where people already know, then they may come. But it's different in relation to putting up like another hotel in like, let's say New York, in Times Square. I mean, people are going to be naturally have a greater propensity of going near you, near your business, so you have a greater chance of getting more business. So a huge piece is just making sure that you're doing what has been consistent for years. Like the 3 things. If you communicate well with Google, just from an SEO standpoint, and you have no technical limitations, like the way you and I are communicating now. If my microphone didn't work, I would just be moving my mouth and you'd be looking at me like I'm crazy. That's a form of communication. So you have to be technically sound and make sure your website communicates with Google. You have to make sure you have content that reflects how people search. And you need to have people link to your website all across the internet in a variety of ways. You do those 3 things, you're going to rank. The only thing that's the kicker is how well are your competitors doing those same things? So if your competitors are doing the same things, but like at a 5x rate from what you're doing, you're going to really have to step up your game. So there really isn't a secret sauce like there used to be, or this little black box. It's more of, hey, Google tells you what you need to do. Go out and do it to the best of your ability, and make sure that you're upping your competitors by at least 10%. That's how you can see victories in the search results.
Amazing. And what I'm seeing is that nowadays the agencies that do well are doing two things. Number one, they have the superior team and systems to track their progress. And number two is they have better marketing for themselves. And because I think the rest are all basics, like, you get a car, it's got 4 wheels, an engine, and it's got a body, right? Brakes, lights and things like that. But Ferrari sells for 100 times more than a Toyota because the marketing and the fine tuning of every detail on that. And that's how I see agencies these days. They have the same building blocks. It's just who does it in a more finesse way, with better system, better teams, and better marketing for themselves. Now, I've seen this thing happen over and over, and this just came to me as you're talking. I'm actually guilty of this myself. Is a lot of agencies work so hard and put all their energy into their clients, but they forget to put it into their own brand and their own promotion. Have you faced this thing in your agency work?
I was going to say that's a great topic. I'm a classic example of somebody who has been behind the scenes building up everybody else's brand. And before I started my agency, I was making other companies millions of dollars, and I got tired of doing that. That's why we created our own agency. From a branding standpoint, as of the end of, I'd say 2022, and up until now, I've literally been spending a lot more time doing what you just said. Doing more podcast interviews, speaking on stages, getting in front of the right people to spread my message. And I'm now, after 20 years, literally just coming out and doing all the things that you and I are talking about for building one's personal brand and then business brand. So I think anyone can fall victim to that, because you just get so busy and you're doing what you have to do to grow the business. And I'm in that phase, and I'm just getting myself out of that phase after 20 years.
Got it. And what specifically are you doing right now to build your brand?
I've enjoyed doing the podcast more than anything, having great conversations about topics that I love. So the podcast has been the biggest. I've been doing more things like, masterminds, and I'm in 4 right now, communicating with different people. Another big thing is I'm having my team communicate more with people from these groups. Just getting conversations started. Another thing that I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start interviewing more people for my podcast. I'm going to be creating one called The Fast Lane, and we're going to talk about successes and failures in business, and I've had both, just like everybody else. I'm more interested in talking to people about the things that they've done in their business where they've had failures that then led to successes, and how they were able to fast track those successes. So that's going to be a major piece to it. There's some things in relation to, advertising with social media. I'm starting to do a lot more long-form content being cut up into short-form content through social media. We're going to be looking at doing more advertising. So I'm just literally going to be throwing the kitchen sink at this sucker. I mean, I'm going to fill the waves with a lot of not just noise, but good information that I think people will want to hear and that they can grow their businesses from it.
That's great. That's amazing. I can't wait to see you blow that up. No, I really can't. I'm looking forward to it. Here's a question that might be interesting for our listeners. Is you're talking a lot about SEO. I know that you're also involved in, actually creating content on LinkedIn and some other social media platforms. Could you tell us how you see social media, the different platforms versus SEO? Because my clients ask me a lot too. They're just like, well, we're creating all the social media content. What about SEO? And they're probably asking you the same question. Hey, you're doing great SEO. What about social media? So what's your thought process or the way you explain the difference between the two?
So I tell people that they should be utilized in conjunction with one another, because when you create content in social media, you're creating these echoes of your brand, and there's these social signals coming, and Google's seeing, hey, other people are referencing your brand within the social space, and it's getting traction organically, and that information gets picked up by Google. So I tell people, continue to do what you have to do in terms of flooding social media, but then you also have to be able to utilize SEO tactics when you're distributing the content. And you have to be able to make sure that people are linking to the assets you're distributing. Because if nobody links to the stuff that you build, they're like, okay, why is this important? The premise behind Google was created years ago with what was called Backrub. basically you have colleges who have resources from one college to the next, and they were in essence rubbing each other's back they were giving each other data. They were making data more freely available, and they were linking from one place to another. So the whole idea of linking is built within the fabric of Google. So in my opinion, that's not going anywhere. So, if you're creating good assets, figure out a way of creating the assets and giving those social assets more legs by getting other people to link to those assets, whether it be a YouTube video that's showing up on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. And it just really depends. And I tell people too, like, just because you're in business and you think, oh, maybe my content should only go to LinkedIn, you'd be surprised at people who are at home, CEOs, CMOs, whoever are at home, and they're looking at Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or TikTok, the same exact things. There's no reason, in my opinion, to avoid those platforms, even if you think, hey, my consumers aren't really there. I mean, you get one person at the right time who typically doesn't go to TikTok, who goes there and sees your brand, then they may think, maybe I got to talk to Ken. He has a good program. So I always just tell people, utilize as many assets as you can. And by assets, I mean like the different kinds of social media platforms.
As you're describing this, I'm a very visual thinker, and I'm picturing a grid. And the more connection points you have, the stronger this structure is going to be. I'm thinking like in an Eiffel Tower, for example, you've got this amazing grid of lattice iron that I don't even know if it's steel. But because there's so many interconnected points, you got a really beautiful and tall tower there. I think if people think of it like that, it's they can try to stack up some in a vertical line, but it's just not going to be very stable. The more connection points you have, the bigger a structure, bigger a presence you can create. Could you tell me a little bit about how you are acquiring clients? And the reason I'm asking this is a lot of the people listening are agency owners, and just the other day I had someone comment on my stuff in my Facebook group, and they were saying, look, I love all this stuff about content creation, but I need clients tomorrow. And, of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, that's pretty tough if you haven't laid the framework or the groundwork. But for you, what's the acquisition process? Like if you were to look at it from when people first hear about you, the first touch point, to the process the typical customer would go through before they sign on the dotted line and give you their credit card.
For us, a huge piece has really dealt with my relationships and looking at the connections that I've had. I've mentioned being in masterminds. So I've looked at it from paid ads. I've tested things with Google. I've tested different ad platforms, tested multiple ways of reaching customers, look at email marketing. We've looked at text, but we've looked at everything. And for whatever reason, in my particular industry, you have to develop a lot more trust to be able to get people to do business with you. So because SEO back in the days had that whole black box type of theory wrapped around it. So I've always looked at, well, how do I build the relationships with other agencies who want to do what I do to an extent? Like maybe you're running a company that doing paid search or social media and they want to offer SEO. Okay, the majority of our business comes from outsourced clients who will come in and say, hey, I really want to do this and I keep turning away this business. And I would tell them, well, do you want to make 30 or 40 or 50% or 100% on whatever I do? And you don't have to do it yourself. All you got to do is talk to the customer and maintain the relationship, because brands don't want to just let go of that. So we have been able to utilize those kinds of relationships through, referrals and people who are meeting me at different, like I was mentioning before, speaking engagements or podcasts, and they learn, I can offer these services and I can build the brand, the trust in that person a little slower, because nobody typically will come in and be like, hey, we have 100 clients. We're going to give you 50 clients. And it's really weird too, because the timeline, the fuse in some cases is very long. So I worked with the Denver Post for, like almost 10 years now. And me getting into the Post, it literally took me over 3 years of courting a person who had a relationship with someone at the Post. And then they finally gave me this project, which was like a turd from a budget standpoint. Like it was super low, super competitive. Expectations were insane. Threw everything that I could but the kitchen sink on it. And I made no money on that campaign. But the campaign showed the Post, hey, this guy knows what the heck he's doing. So that opened up a door, and that opened up to hundreds of customers. And then, the same thing happened. Then for me, one of the kickers was good relationships with agencies. And then people would leave these agencies because they didn't like to stay in the same place for longer than 2 years. And then all of a sudden they'd say, hey, Brett, I'm at a new agency and I need these services. Can you provide them? I'm like, absolutely. So a tremendous amount of it has been word of mouth through those agency level clients and or partnerships. But I've tried tons and tons and tons of things for marketing direct to consumers. And for me, my niche has always been working with other agencies and giving them the ability to have us come in and do all the work and have them at the end of the month. All they have to do is literally hand their customers, the documents that show what's been done and what the success is for their campaigns. And in some cases, people will want to get us on the phone. The majority of them, they don't even need a call because they're like, hey, they see the work, they see the results, and it's typically like having a kickoff call, but then, in between the other months after that kickoff call, SEO is not sexy. Like content creation and link building, it's not sexy, but someone's got to do it. Like if you want a home and you're in South Beach, you're not out there, mowing your own lawn, trimming the hedges. You could do it. I actually like doing it. I live in Tampa, Florida. My neighbors look at me like I'm crazy because I'm out there mowing my yard and it's hot as it's sweaty and it's nasty outside. But, for those people who don't want to have to do it, but they want to get everything done, specifically for their clients, that's where we come in to provide phenomenal results for our customers.
Yeah, that's so great. And what you said there about boring is, it's not sexy, right? It's just boring work. And by the way, before we forget about this, we did have a conversation about working together in that capacity, which I need to follow up with you on. That would be super interesting, even for my own brand, potentially. I have two things. Number one, definitely when I'm doing exciting, fun, revolutionary things, it's high risk. I lose money as much as I make money. Like, for example, that currently I have this invention. Oh God, starting from scratch and learning everything over again because it's manufacturing and a lot of computer chip technology, which I've just got to learn from scratch. It's high risk because it's a new area that I've got to learn. Whereas if I just stick to what I'm doing, it's very profitable. So you hit the nail on the head there. Boring is profitable and profitable is fun. And that's what one of my mentors always drills into me is boring is profitable is fun. But the other thing I want to say is with your client base, I'm really curious to know what industries benefit the most from your services.
Depends on the niche. So for instance, half of the business is in relation to agencies who have businesses that are small and medium sized. So anything from doctors, dentists, lawyers, chiropractors, anything where it has like a service-based business, that's about 50% of what we do with agencies. The other 50% is anybody who is like a podcaster, an influencer, a coach, people who have bigger audiences and they want to reach more people and get more eyeballs. The direct to consumer customers are those larger ticket type of customers who you have a larger audience and you have, like you mentioned, you have this Ferrari, but unfortunately you have like an engine in it that might be like a Chevy Tahoe, which is a pretty good engine for an SUV. But we come in and say, hey, you got a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. Let's get in and really tweak that engine and make it drive like a Lamborghini. So it's not like you have to rebuild anything. You just have to go in and recalibrate the engine. And when you do that, then your engine runs really, really, really well. Now, clients who are small and medium-sized businesses, those are great to work with because we're looking at it from more of a local standpoint. So you might have like a restaurant in a city or restaurant in cities that you're trying to go after. Like a Mexican restaurant in Tampa. Those are going to be a little easier to rank for. They're typically going to cost a little bit less money because it's geo-specific. But like when you start talking about going after high-end keyword phrases and brand awareness for much bigger types of phrases and being in different industries like you're a coach, you have to put a lot more resources into those campaigns because you have so many more competitors to work with. So it's kind of a twofold question. If I'm working with agencies, it's typically small and medium-sized businesses. If it's direct to consumers, it's more larger type of clients that are looking for boosting their overall brand within the internet.
Perfect. Now, that's super interesting because as you're describing this, I'm thinking to myself, well, my previous business, as you know, we used to host large scale events here in Japan, multiple thousands of people every other month. And then I pivoted to the agency I'm doing right now. But looking at this completely new beast that I have, which is the GoBox Studio, my invention, this is a direct to consumer. There's probably also going to be a B2B aspect with some, corporations being interested in actually buying these. Would that be a suitable type of business to look at SEO services? Or from your professional perspective, do you think that that's suitable or is that a completely different game?
I think it depends on how you approach customers. So you're looking for people who want to do podcasting, who have podcasting on needs for on the go. So the market for podcasters is massive. I mean, you could do a B2B or B2C type of offering for customers who are influencers or people who are doing podcasts. There's a massive market for that. You just have to figure out things, the types of phrases that people are going after that are related to like podcasting on the go or podcasting kits. And the reason I know this is I did spend a significant amount of time researching your company before we had that conversation at the second mastermind that we were in. And I basically noticed a lot of people were searching for things related to podcasting, like setups and things of that nature. But nobody is really searching for things related to podcasting, like on the go. And if they were, it was more like different things that you'd need for podcasting, like a certain kind of, 4K camera or a particular type of, microphone or green screens or lighting. But there was only like one or two companies that I had to search creatively to find that were even remotely close to what you did. And their offering wasn't quite like the product itself wasn't quite as good. It kind of almost looked like it was like antiquated, like it didn't look anywhere as good as what you were doing.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that because it's too new a concept, people aren't searching. So it's hard to hit it from an SEO standpoint because they don't know that they're looking for it, right?
What I've always noticed from an SEO standpoint is you have to get people who are searching for things where they don't know what they don't know. And by that, I mean, I had a friend who had reached out to me and said, hey, I want to sell this product, but they don't really know how many people are searching for it. We started doing the search and we said, hey, not a tremendous amount of people are searching for that particular product, but there's a ton of people, like they sell products in relation to nootropics. And there's not a tremendous, there's a good amount of people are doing things for like brain boosting, brain supplements, things of that nature. And what I'm finding is there's a lot of people who are searching for things related to for inflammation throughout the body. They're looking for health benefits related to decreasing the toxicity of their body. And even though they're not searching at a great rate for their product, they're searching for things related to their product. And when you create great content to reflect those secondary type of keyword phrases, guess what? People now get to say, oh, I'm reading something about inflammation, and I didn't even know that this turmeric product is as good as it is. I didn't even know that you can use turmeric for that. And now they're using it. Now you've just connected the dots for them before they knew that they should have searched for something. So that's where content would come in way more for someone like you or somebody who's selling a product that doesn't have a phenomenal amount of search volume, because there's a ton of people who search every single month for things related to like brain boosting, brain supplements, nootropics, inflammation in the body. And then you just create a parallel between what they're searching for and your product based on the content you create. So you still can do what you got to do. You just have to approach it differently.
That's amazing. I remember, I don't even know if this thing still works, but there used to be a time when SEO companies were doing tons and tons of these, semi-fake comparison websites, just like, comparing all the courses, and they'd make a grid, right? And then kind of surreptitiously, their client is like number 2 or number 3. But when you look at the numbers, then that would be the obvious choice for some reason. Does that still work, these comparison sites?
I think there are some that do it for affiliate products. I think it still works from a ranking standpoint because now you have the top 30 brands and you get to talk about each one of those, and Google sees a relevancy with that. But I think consumers are getting more hip to where they think, man, this looks like an affiliate site. They're promoting information, and then, everything at the very top, it's like, okay, are they promoting something that they're directly connected with? So it does work. I don't think it works to the same extent as it used to in the past. I think not so much with consumers. I still think it works with Google because you still see a lot of search results flooded with comparison sites, but I think that's going to start going by the wayside here by the end of this year.
I think you could probably like 99% automate that to AI if you wanted to do that. And because of that, there's going to be too much, and then Google's going to start, down ranking those potentially. I'm not the expert, but that's just logically the path I see happening. How do you answer the question, and I'm sure you get this from time to time, from a prospect that says, hey, what's the ROI of what you're doing for us? How do I justify paying you, multiple thousands of dollars every month? And when am I going to see my money back?
That's a great question. We tell people now, look at this from a 90-day standpoint. So instead of looking at it for a year or multiple years, look at doing a sprint. Anybody can do anything for 90 days, like in terms of business. Like if you can't give something 90 days, you don't even need to think about it. Paid search, SEO, omni-channel marketing, video marketing. Give it 90 days to see what can come from it. And the great thing about SEO is you can track everything. If you're utilizing analytics through like Google's platform, you can see where your sales came from. So there is no guesswork with, did it come from social media, SEO, content, referral traffic, direct traffic, someone's typing in my brand name. So in those 90 days, you get your website optimized, you get the content created, and you start building links to the site. If you're not seeing traction in 90 days where you're starting to see a lift in, overall keyword rankings, traffic, and things of that nature, then yeah, you probably are not working with a good team. But if a team cannot define what they're going to be doing for you in that first 90 days to where you can say, hey, I've got this bone, this meat, and I can chew on this and see everything that you did, I know it's probably going to take 6 to 9 months before I can start to see the needle push, but it really depends on the brand. If you're working with a company that's smaller, brand new website, I would say, hey, you're going to be doing this for like at least a year if you don't have as many assets to utilize. Now, if the brand has been around 5-10 years and they come in, you could potentially make a tremendous amount of headway with their brand in 6 months. But I always tell people, look at your analytics. Data doesn't lie. And here's a great example. I've got a customer who sells appliances throughout the United States. They had us focus on one particular type of appliance. We did. And then we also optimized the other number of pages of their site. We just did that at no extra cost. And after, I think, 5 months, we came back to the client. They're like, hey, how are we ranking? We showed them the rankings for the appliance-related keywords. And they were doing better. Like out of the 30 keywords that we were ranking for, I think about 15 or 20 after 4 to 5 months hit the first page of Google. And they were kind of like, hey, I don't really know, how well is this? And so I utilized a tool called SpyFu to see how much it would cost. We look at their organic traffic. How much would it cost for that organic traffic to be paid for with paid marketing dollars on Google's AdWords platform be worth? When we started, we were looking at the site as a whole, and I came to the client and said, hey, 5 months, we've literally added $104,000 monthly traffic to your site in 5 months. And the agency said, no, I can't show my customer that. I'm like, why not? I just gave you $104,000 a month in extra traffic. And they said, oh, well, we're only going after appliance keywords, and some of these keywords are for other areas. And I said, fortunately for me, I can optimize a good section of your site, and it's going to increase the weight of the entire site. So not only did we see an increase in traction for the phrases we went after, but I always tell people, that rising tide will lift all ships. My mind was blown. You don't want to show your customer an extra $104,000 of monthly traffic that we generated simply because we weren't focusing on those keywords. So it's interesting because ROI to each person means something different. A lot of businesses look at traffic, some look at conversions, some look at, are their sites becoming stickier? How much longer are they staying? I always tell people in those month-to-month periods after you hit that 90 days, you should start to see some things pick up. And then by month 4, rankings go higher, traffic goes higher. Month 5, same thing after month 6, 7, 8, and 9. And you can look at your analytics and say, hey, how many conversions are we having? To us, what's important? Is it getting someone to fill out a form, to sign up for a newsletter, or to actually come in and go to the store? Once we identify those things, it's very easy to tie those things specifically to Google Analytics. So there is no, I paid you X amount of money. What does that equate to from an ROI standpoint? It's super clear.
I love how you describe that, and I love that you have specific examples. And I think that every agency needs to have their version of what you just said. How do you justify the investment? I think that for some people, there's more of a personal story. Some people, there's specific examples of like what you just said. And what's interesting for me is that my approach to this is that when people ask me that, I say, I think you're too early to be purchasing our services. You shouldn't be investing in us if you're looking for the ROI of social media content. I can give you example after example of my clients whose social profiles have blown up. However, we don't build funnels. We don't track every single view and if it converts to a sale or not, simply because it's too complex an algorithm to get into and audit every single one of their sales. However, if you don't have a sales funnel or a conversion mechanism built in, and if you don't know your numbers, then you should figure that out first. And I refer them to a partner agency that actually builds funnels and runs ads. Once you got that sorted, come back to us, and we're going to throw a lot more fuel onto that fire with social media content. So, I literally just turn people away if they say, what's the ROI? And like, I don't think you're thinking about this the right way. You're probably a bit too early. So a lot of times, like half the time people say, wait, no, I do know. I do want this. And then it completely flips the table. All of a sudden they're the ones chasing me versus me trying to, close the sale on them. Thank you for that. That was really interesting. What mistakes are you seeing people make when they think about SEO, like misconceptions, strategies that don't work?
I would say, I mean, even if you just look at the content piece, we always talk about garbage in, garbage out. Doesn't matter how good the tool is. If you feed it with bad prompts or you don't give it, you're not very specialized with what you're telling it to create, you're going to get data that's bland. So like in terms of creating really good content, if you're not thinking about it from the standpoint of giving some user more of an ability to do something, like you're having them engage with your content, they're learning, you're answering questions, solving problems. That's what Google looks for. So a lot of times people use these tools, they get all excited. Oh, GTP4, it went from Chat GPT to GPT-4. This is awesome. The technology is spectacular. But like if they're not using it right and they're not creating those prompts really correctly, you're going to have issues. So prime example, when people go in and use these technology, they typically will say, hey, I need to go do this, this, this. They take it out and they make some changes and they're good. When we look at content for creation, we'll take the content, we'll create a very specialized prompt that tells the technology, hey, go here, look at this information, look at their brand, look at the speaking, the way the brand speaks, the messaging. We need to create new content in relation to these other topics. It creates it. We then take that content, we will run it through other AI tools to make sure that it sounds even better from a clarity standpoint. Then we run it through Grammarly or Quillbot to make sure that it sounds correct. Then we run it through Copyscape checkers. We run it through something called originality.ai to make sure it doesn't sound like it's written by AI 100%. And then at that point, we look at the content and we have humans edit the content. So I've just described a 6 or 7 step process of how you should be looking at content creation when you're using AI to put that rocket on your back that I mentioned earlier. If you do that in relation to just creating the content and telling Google to do X, Y, Z, and it's not to say that that won't rank. Some of that content will rank. I've seen it. But at the same time, if you create it the way that I just said, you're able to take that content and have it rank much faster, and it actually is going to stay there because you're adhering to Google's guidelines. You're creating content that is very user-friendly. So I think that the kicker here, specifically even as it relates to content with AI, it's building things way too quickly and not having an engineer or a person who's very, very good at the prompts telling the technology to do what it needs to do, because they're basically just putting in garbage and they're getting out garbage. I don't think it's going to last for the long haul.
Okay, thanks for that. Appreciate it. Now, are you seeing any real value to advertising on Bing these days? As you know, Microsoft has had this bump in notoriety, you might say, by integrating AI into their search. And I know that you're all about search engine optimization. Give us your take on that.
So I've always told people, if you look at it from an advertising standpoint, just advertising, I don't think you really could tap, Google in terms of showing ads. I've seen brands like Progressive spending millions upon millions of dollars on a monthly basis, and they were getting a lot of traffic. Like those brands, I could say, yeah, they may potentially tap their market in Google. So that opens up an opportunity for more traffic from other platforms. So Bing, they still have some market share, and the consumers who are at Bing will still engage with brands like they would with Google. I do think, given the fact that there are more things happening with the open AIs, their GPT tools, and the other artificial intelligence tools like DALL-E and things of that nature for images, there's a lot more opportunity for getting new users of Bing who weren't there in the past. So I would say, yeah, from an advertising perspective, yeah, there's an injection of new customers going there. From an SEO standpoint, if you do what Google wants, Microsoft typically will rank on Google and Bing if you're doing the same kinds of things that have been done in the last 20 years. Content, links, and being technically sound. It works very well on one versus the other. So you should be focusing on both, in my opinion.
All right. Thank you for that. We already are kind of talking about the future, but are you looking at the way your company is structured or the services you're offering changing drastically based on recent technological advances?
We've already, just in the last 90 days, we've made significant changes to how we operate in terms of creating things. So like, let's crawl a person's website. Let's pull 50 pages from their website. I can create titles and description tags for 50 pages in less than 5 minutes with tech. Now, it goes back to, as I mentioned before, being able to massage the data. Still going to have a person who knows what they're doing, look at those elements once the AI has kind of worked its magic, but it takes away about 75% of the harder work that you would have done. So we are making changes to how we optimize websites, marketing copy, in terms of the content for link building. We're making changes, dramatic changes, even like when you look at the content process. The 7 steps that I just talked to you about, we've had to completely change our content creation process because I want to be able to utilize tech to create content at scale, and not just create content that's created by AI, but use the AI to have a starting conversation for our writers to then come back and say, hey, why should I have to do all this research when I can hook up GPT-4 to the internet and get data that's active now, that's reliable, and not have to fact check? Like, you're going to still fact check if it's very technical, but some things, like, you don't have to fact check if you're an influencer and you're talking about, the things that you need to do to have better spiritual enlightenment or manifestation or visualization. Like, a lot of this data just exists. So
wait, does currently GPT, I've upgraded to whatever, that $20 a month thing to get to GPT-4. Is that jacked into the internet, like current stuff?
Their database was only up to 2021. But if you use, there's a tool called AIPRM. AIPRM. It's a plugin that you get specifically for Google Chrome. Now, what I like about this tool is you put the plugin into the system, and now you can actually parse data from the internet and have the AI process that data. So now you're going to get data that is literally as new as today. I see people running news clips from, like they can go to Yahoo News and get information from tomorrow morning and have that sitting on their website. If they were to just use OpenAI's GPT-4, you're not going to get that information. It's going to say, sorry,
Amazing.
I can't connect to the internet, but I can give you some information. So it's kind of interesting too, because I think it has some functionality with the web, because I have taught the tool to review pages and give me information. So it's kind of weird because it'll tell you it can't, but then it'll collect data from those pages and it'll give you information based. So I think the model is a little bit confused when it talks to you.
Yeah. You know what? Between the time you mentioned that and now, I've just installed it and I'm going to be playing with that. So thank you for that. What I'd like to hear is let's look at SEO from like a bronze, silver, and gold perspective. Like bronze being like people don't want to invest money, but they've got a bit of time. What should they be doing? Silver is they've got a little bit of money, maybe like, $500 to $1,000 a month. What could they do with that? Gold is invest in the best, someone like you. So let's talk about those like levels of SEO capability that people can be thinking about.
So on a bronze level, people could be looking at becoming topical authority leaders. So they could use tools like GPT-4 and create what are called topical hubs, where they figure out what are all the different keywords that people are searching for related to their business. What are all the primary and what are all the secondary keywords? And then creating content to reflect every single one of those keywords. Now, when Google looks at your site and notices that you're starting to write content for 100, 200, 300 phrases, your traffic, the chances of it going up dramatically increase. That's the first piece. Second piece is looking at things like Advice Local or Bright Local, where you can go out and get connected with data centers that will push information about your business. AdviceLocal.com charges like $40 to $50 a month. It's like a Yext.com, and they'll push information about your business, if it's local, all over the internet. And it's going to cost you less than $600 a year to do it. So that's what I would say for people who don't really have much money, but they want to do things. Do those things. Create your content. You look at tools like semrush.com. It's another very good tool that you can go out and subscribe to it. I don't even think you have to subscribe to it to get some data in relation to your site, but if you do subscribe, you'll be able to get high-level things that you need to do from a technical standpoint. So that's the lowest level. I would say the mid-tier level is people who are willing to do the things that we talked about at the very low level, but people who are looking to create more content at scale. They're going to be the ones who have team members who can go in and start using tools and figure out, well, what are the keyword clusters that are in relation to all the different phrases of what I'm looking for? And then how do I get that person to create more content for me at scale than you're paying for, like GPT-4? It's $20 a month, can help create a lot of content. And then also start looking for means of generating backlinks to your site. Maybe it's working with somebody like yourself where they're creating a lot of long-form content, chopping it up, and flooding the market with things in relation to who they are and what they do. That's going to help out because now you're going to have social signals pointing to your site. And you're going to have a local presence. You're going to have, your technical, aspects of your site be found. Now, if you're looking at it from a high-end level, these are businesses who want to compete with the big boys. When you work with somebody at that level, they're going to be making sure that you have all the technical aspects of your business taken care of. So like if there's things that need to be done at the server level, they'll make recommendations. And if you have a team, they hand it off to your team. If you don't have a team, they'll figure out a way of getting it done for you. When it comes to basic components of SEO, they'll do that on your behalf if you allow them to. When it comes to content, they'll do the same thing. They'll create content briefs, and that'll show you exactly what they're writing about, why they need to write it, how they're going to write it. And then they write tons and tons and tons of good content based off of those different phrases. So I like to tell people, let's do a sprint of technical SEO, on-site content, and link building in those first 3 months. You get that with all the technical stuff we talked about. The content piece is having somebody just go over your site with a magnifying glass and look for opportunities and figure out how someone can search for every single thing that you do, and then how can they help you create content to reflect every single one of those keywords. And if you do that, what you're going to see is there's this massive net that gets thrown out onto the internet. And Google's going to say, hey, Ken, he's talking about selling these portable podcasts. And he has all these references to his business talking about that one thing. And he's got all this content, how to set it up, what's the best thing to look for in a camera, in a microphone, in a green screen. But that's just like a starting conversation, because once a person learns all this stuff, then they're like, oh crap, all I really need to do is get a green screen to work with his program because he has everything else. So you're educating them along the way, but it's really having somebody who can do it for you. And I talked to one of my friends a week and a half ago, and he's like, yeah, if we do this with you guys, how much time do we have to focus on the blogs? And I said, you don't focus on any of that. All you have to do is review what I give you. If the team gives you content, you say, this is good, it needs to be tweaked, let me get it back to you. I said, but at the end of the day, when you're working with a really good team at that level, the goal is for them to hand you what you need and say, please review this. Once it's reviewed, let us take care of the ball, because people don't have time to do any of this stuff. It doesn't have to be sexy. SEO is not sexy, but technology is sexy to me. New trends, ways of doing business where you're using tech to get things done faster, not just trying to save a buck, but literally getting things done. I had this euphoric moment. I literally integrated in GPT 3.5 with Google Sheets. And I uploaded about 100 URLs, and I was like, okay, let's see how long. I created some prompts. Create a title tag that's 75 characters in one column. Another one, create a description for meta tags that's 150 characters. And I literally created the prompt and then copied those two cells down 100 lines. And by the time I got done copying it, I swear, the 100 titles and descriptions were written in less than 5 minutes. Like when I was doing this, I worked on a project for Nationwide Insurance. I optimized 300 URLs. That literally took me a month to do title tags, description tags, and some components with SEO. I did a third of that, at least the raw output, in less than 5 minutes. I thought to myself, if I had this technology 15 years ago, my mind would have been blown.
I feel like this is one of those watershed moments, just like the people who understood the power of the internet when it was first introduced. These guys are dominating, the Amazons, the Googles, all those, those companies. And the people that didn't, well, they might still be trying to sell newspapers for all we know, right? But it's not really about the technology. It's about the application of the technology and the people who can find the potential to use it, to maximize it, that are going to benefit. Now, we're just about out of time, but I've got to ask one thing. If somebody has listened this far, obviously they're interested in what we were talking about, what you offer. So what's the best place for someone to get in touch with you if they want to find out more about your business, have a conversation with you, or potentially just, straight up hire you?
Easiest way is to go to SEOoutsourcing.com. There's a tremendous amount of information about what we do, who we are, or go to YouTube and just look up Dr. Brett S. Lane. I've got a tremendous amount of videos that we're creating. I'm doing a lot of the stuff you and I are talking about, where I'm creating content and I'm doing a lot of podcasting interviews. That's another really easy way for people to get on and learn more about who I am and what I'm about. I also had the opportunity to do a TEDx Talk in December of last year. And if anybody needed to watch anything about who I am, if they look at, Brett S. Lane and TEDx, they're going to find a video where I go through my journey of, what I had to go through to get through life in the last 5 years. That right there gives them the best information about who I am as a human being that then leads into who I am as a business person.
Amazing. I'm going to follow up with you to get all those links, because what I'm going to do is tell you, the listener, to go check out the links down in the podcast show notes. If you're on YouTube, we're going to put that in the description. You're going to want to check that out, and definitely it will be worth your 5 minutes and one click to go click a couple of those and see if it would be worth it to pursue finding out more about Brett and reaching out to him. Brett, thank you so much for this hour-long interview. I hope my audience is going to love it as much as I did, because for me, I think there's a lot of things that I asked for completely selfish reasons. I was like, I've got to know this. This is something that I can use or apply. So thank you so much for sharing so generously with all that information. Any last words that you want to share before we end this podcast?
Yeah, I would say lastly, we talk about technology changing. If you're not willing to adhere to the changes in technology and grab a hold of it, it's going to literally pass you by. And I think you put it very well earlier when you said that some business people who didn't adhere to the changes of the internet, hey, the internet's coming, what is this thing? People made millions and upon billions of dollars by looking at the technology and doing something different. So regardless of if you're doing anything with SEO or tech or whatever, you still can use artificial intelligence to dramatically decrease the amount of time it takes you to do anything on the internet. So do not let this technology pass you by and not enable yourself to 10x your business with whatever you're doing, because I'm seeing it every single day.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Brett, I appreciate it. And let's continue this conversation after the podcast as well, because obviously there's room for me to grow and figure out how I can up my game with SEO. That's it for now, guys, and I'll see you in the next episode